Hello everybody, Zwhatsh from AwesomeEpicGuys here with another Zwhatsh narrates a top 10 World of Tanks list video. A while back I did a top 10 shittiest tank list video, which you guys seem to enjoy, so I felt like why not make another top 10 video, because they are fun to make and they also get a lot of views on YouTube. So yeah, I'm back with another top 10 World of Tanks related list video. Although looking back at my previous top 10 video, I think I kinda overcomplicated my explanations and requirements for that list in particular. So this time I'm gonna try and make it much more simpler to understand. So in this video we are not actually gonna talk about tanks that are currently in the game. Instead, we're gonna talk about vehicles that could potentially be in the game, or rather should be in the game. So World of Tanks is a pretty damn old game by now. It's like 10 plus years. And the amount of tanks in the game is reaching very high numbers. We're like at around 700, 800 tanks or something like that. Stupid numbers of tanks. So this means that introducing a new tank to the game that does not resemble any already existing tank by gameplay style or just aesthetic, it's kind of difficult. So I thought I could make a little personal top 10 list of vehicles that could be interesting and fresh and exciting for the game. So, a few noteworthy mentions before we dig into the top 10 list. Firstly, this list will be based on 1. My own opinions, and 2. Community suggestions that I've seen floating around the internet and generally in the forums and in the community. Secondly, I was gonna include vehicles such as the Chieftain Mark 6 and some Japanese tank destroyers, but seeing as the Mark 6 is already in the game files and the Japanese tank destroyers are already in World of Tanks Blitz, I'm gonna assume that Wargaming already has some kind of plan for these vehicles for the future. So basically, I'm not gonna mention any vehicles that are in the game in any shape or form, like for example the Sturmtiger, which was an event mode tank. Also, while I'm going to try and present some historical information about every vehicle on this list, I am by no means a historian in any shape or form, but I am a fan of history though, which is why I want to at least try and present some historical information for you guys. However, I did contact some people that have a bit better knowledge about tanks and war vehicles than I do. So, big shout out to Davidblader and Mitsu. Names, who helped me assemble some information for this list. Thank you very much. So anyway, if you see any incorrect information in this video, it's simply because I am potato. With that said, let's dig into the top 10 tanks that should be in World of Tanks. Number 10. The Merkava Mk I. This is a very fearsome and cool looking Israeli vehicle, which I have heard many community members being hyped about for a long time. And I agree, this tank looks amazing and would be really fun to have as a high tier vehicle, maybe around tier 9 and 10. The reason why I chose it as the number 10 on this list is because it might be a bit problematic to implement. Firstly, it might be a bit too modern, which is why I chose specifically the Mark I, which started development in 1973 but entered service around 1979. But the biggest problem really is the nation. For this tank to be implemented, it would probably need to be part of a new Israeli tech tree. Now, the funny thing about this is that they have plenty of contenders for higher tier vehicles, but they are lacking in vehicles that would suit for the lower tiers, that would not be copy-paste vehicles. The Israeli tank production didn't really kick off until the Cold War era, so making a full tech tree looks problematic right now. This could be solved if they made it perhaps a tier 10 collector's vehicle, similar to how when the Type 59 and the Type 62 were the only two tanks of their own nation back in the day, the China nation, or when the Poodle was the only Polish tank for a very long period. So the Merkava Mk I could simply be a single tank of its very own nation, or you know, a series of tanks like the MOWAG could also be a suitable contender for such a deal. The final problem, however, is that even though the Merkava is a really cool looking vehicle, I'm unsure if it would bring any new interesting gameplay styles to the game. Wargaming is all about trying to implement new mechanics and new unique gameplay to each and every new vehicle, and I'm uncertain to if this vehicle has that. It's armed with a 105mm gun and it's a main battle tank, so it would probably land in a heavy tank role in World of Tanks. With that said, it would probably just be a pretty good tank that looks pretty neat. I would still like to have it though. Number 9. The BT-42. Suomi perkele! Probably the most iconic Finnish tank. It's a BT-7 with a modified turret and armed with a 114mm howitzer. The concept was influenced by the Soviet KV-2, so this pretty much just reeks of memes. It would probably play similarly to the BT-7 artillery that's already in the game, but with fatter alpha damage and perhaps move to a higher tier, tier 4 or 5 perhaps. I've heard many people being hyped about this vehicle, and so am I. Would probably be a lot of fun at lower tiers. The problem again is about nation. I don't think Finland has enough vehicles to make their own entire nation, although funnily enough they have their own tier 1 vehicle in World of Tanks Blitz as part of the Europe tech tree. A similar situation could be implemented to PC, a tech tree with mixed vehicles from different nations. If not, it could just be a collector's vehicle or a premium tank of its own nation. See you at the marketplace, Finnish people. Number 8. The Panzer 74. So this vehicle is a Swiss main battle tank project which started in 1969. It was a vehicle that would combine armor, mobility and firepower, even sporting similar turret armor characteristics as the chieftain main battle tank. This vehicle was armed with a 105mm gun and would also sport hydropneumatic suspension. The vehicle unfortunately never left the design phase, but would indeed make an interesting and balanced addition to the game. It would probably be similar to if the Merkava would be implemented to the game, gameplay-wise, but this time with a hydropneumatic suspension mechanic added, which would give it some more spice. This vehicle was brought forward by Mitsu to me, who designed this Swiss tech tree proposal. If this vehicle would be added to the game, it could be a part of a completely new Swiss tech tree, just like the one I show here. There's definitely a meaty amount of tanks that could be going into the game if this proposal would be accepted by Wargaming. So Mr. proposes the Panzer 74 to be a heavy tank vehicle if it were to be added to World of Tanks. Personally, I think this vehicle looks pretty sexy and would fit the game like a glove. And the next vehicle on this list is also a vehicle brought forward by Mr. in his Swiss tech tree proposal. Number 7. The MOWAG Taifun. This vehicle is a rather obscure Swiss vehicle with not too many details known about it, although, for good reasons, it has gathered quite a reputation as the speedy Jag Panzer on steroids. It was a project that was developed by the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. Exactly what year is unknown, but it would undeniably be one of the more modern vehicles of the game. The vehicle is a casemate tank destroyer, which for World of Tanks means a turretless tank destroyer. Historically, it was the last casemate tank destroyer to be developed, as at the time nobody really bothered with such vehicles anymore. Only a prototype was developed as no customers could be found for the project. This prototype carried a 105mm gun, but if the vehicle would have reached production stage, it is stated that the vehicle would also have supported larger caliber guns if the customer requested it. As quite a few tanks in World of Tanks already carry 105mm guns, Mr. proposes that for the game it should carry at least a 120mm gun, which is an official caliber the vehicle supported. The armor was not impressive at all, but not really the selling point of the tank. That would be the gun combined with its insane mobility, 72 km/h top speed. This would make it one of the most impressive tank destroyers in the game, mobility-wise. Essentially, it would be a crazy mobile sniper. In Mr. tech tree proposal, he proposes this vehicle to land in tier 10, which makes sense considering the characteristics. He also describes another vehicle called the Jag Panzer RUF, which would be the tier 9 predecessor. This vehicle also has a 72 km/h speed limit, but also supports the same speed going in reverse. So So 72 kilometers per hour forwards and 72 kilometers per hour backwards. Now historically, it is unknown if the Taifun possessed such a feature, but from a game design perspective, it would make sense to apply this type of characteristic from the tier 9 to the tier 10 as well, which would be the Taifun. This would make the Taifun very much like the Swedish tank destroyers, but even faster and more aggressive. This would be an insanely mobile sniper with no armor whatsoever, but with a punchy and impressive gun. I would love to see that in the game. So, huge thanks to Mitsu for providing me with information about these Swiss vehicles. I will provide a link to his tech tree proposal in the description below if you are interested in reading about more of his ideas. Number 6. The Mitsu 104. So, there seems to be this general idea that the Japanese did not have many heavy tanks at all, which have resulted in the Japanese heavy tank tech tree to be a mismatch of very historically accurate vehicles to pretty much pure fiction. The Type 4 and Type 5 heavy are under debate if they actually existed or not. This image of a Type 4/5 turret has been circulating the internet quite a lot, and seems to be where wargaming found their inspiration of their general aesthetic. The OI probably existed with like 99% certainty. Some think it did not. Personally, I'm in the real camp. But even if it didn't, there was at least blueprints of the vehicle, which leaves it pretty much real in my opinion. The lower tier vehicles existed physically, but the ONI, OHO and the OI experimental are just pure fantasy. The ONI and OHO are basically just based on incorrect descriptions through intel of the OI. And the OI experimental seems to pretty much just be pulled from wargaming's butthole. Lol. In conclusion, the Japanese heavy tech tree is a pretty bumpy ride when it comes to historical accuracy, but recent digging into archives shows that the Japanese had a pretty decent heavy tank production, but most of it is hidden behind classified protection and most of the tanks were destroyed during the war. A while ago, I read David Lister's Forgotten Tanks and Guns from the 1920s, 30s and 40s, which highlights a bunch of Japanese heavy tanks that existed. So my idea was that we could try and kind of redeem the Japanese heavy tech tree by introducing some actually historically Japanese heavies into the game. I know that historical accuracy doesn't really matter anymore in World of Tanks, but you know, kind of just feels good when it's actually based off something real, you know? If I could only choose one Japanese heavy tank to implement into the game, I would definitely choose the Mitsu 104, which is a whopping 8 meters long and sports a 75mm gun. It could be introduced as a premium or a collector's tank, who knows. Currently, the only Japanese heavy premium in the game we have is a bootleg Tiger, so just do it, wargaming. Do it. Number 5. IKV 91. Or Infanterikanonvagn 91. Probably one of the more famous actually existing Swedish vehicles, after the S-Tank of course. The first prototype was developed in 1969 and the role of this vehicle was assault gun. The reason I chose this vehicle is 1. I am Swedish and biased. And 2, there are not too many turreted tank destroyers in World of Tanks, and the most fitting role for this vehicle would probably be a turreted tank destroyer. It carries a 90mm gun, so it could be implemented as a mobile, fast-firing turreted tank destroyer, maybe at around tier 7 or 8. I actually made a little fan-made tech tree myself for how this vehicle could be implemented if it was to be part of a tech tree. It would definitely be the flagship tank of the tech tree, the selling tank. Maybe it would fit better as a tier 8 premium in that case. Anyhow, as a Swede, I would love to see this vehicle in the game, and I think it's a pretty recognizable vehicle generally. I think many people would agree that this vehicle is like an iconic vehicle that deserves a spot in the World of Tanks. Number 4. Number 4. UDES 19. This vehicle was a Swedish 1970s main battle tank project, which was one of the many constructions and concepts developed for the UDES project. And yes, I know what you're thinking, what the f is this future alien ass looking tank? This thing probably can't even fit any crew inside a turret. Bad! Doesn't match the general technology of World of Tanks. And yes, you are correct, the turret is unmanned, and is pretty futuristic. And not too long ago I would agree with the sentiment that the technology is too modern to fit into the World of Tanks timeframe. But the most recent Italian heavy tank line just opened up the possibility for this kind of technology. Apparently, if the Rinoceronte would have left the concept stage and actually been built in real life, it would have sported an unmanned turret. Same situation with this UDES 19 tank. This design is so whack, it would introduce some very interesting hull-down strategies for the game. The armor would pretty much be non-existent, but the hitbox would be so small. I'm actually not sure if it would be a medium, a tank destroyer or what in World of Tanks. This vehicle also has a 105mm gun, so it would fit around tier 8 to 10. Maybe as a part of a new non-manned turret tech tree. Its predecessor, the UDES 18 and the UDES 17, could fit as its previous vehicle if it would be a tech tree. The only thing I really know for sure is that this vehicle would be some pretty good memes in World of Tanks. Number 3. The TAA. This vehicle is a friggin' monster and I absolutely love how it looks. This turreted tank destroyer was brought forward to me by Davidblader, who has designed this Romanian tech tree proposal. If this vehicle would ever be introduced to the game, it would for sure be as a part of this new Romanian tech tree, which looks pretty amazing to be honest. So this vehicle was a Cold War project which started development around 1978. So introducing this tank into the game would make it the most modern tank in World of Tanks. Currently the most modern vehicles are the Type 64 from around 1975 and the Char Futur from around 1977. So this tank would therefore push the time frame of World of Tanks even further forward. This could be problematic, but I'm not exactly sure where Wargaming wants to draw the line. If any prototype was actually built though is apparently unknown, but there are known blueprints. So as you can see, the turret is extremely narrow, even more so than of the Concept 1B, which would be very interesting for hull-down tactics. It would also sport an autoloader, maybe even an auto-reloader, and a 64 km/h speed limit, which would make it one of the faster tank destroyers of World of Tanks, plus one of the few with an auto-loading feature. The armor would pretty much be non-existent, except for the gun mantlet, which would have a heat shield. All of these features combined would make one of the most interesting tank destroyers in the game. And also, it looks pretty goddamn amazing. Our number 2 on this list is also from Davidblader's tech tree proposal, and it's number 2. The Mareșal. Mareșal, probably one of the most iconic Romanian tanks out there. Apparently it inspired the design of the Hetzer tank. In comparison to the Hetzer, however, this thing is tiny. It would provide some serious memes. The development of this vehicle started in 1942. There were 7 prototypes built along with different variants. In World of Tanks, it would be provided with a sexy selection of guns, like a 75mm AT gun and a 122mm howitzer. I would probably mount a howitzer. The tank's extremely low profile, it's lower than the LCAMX and the UE-57, combined with a gun selection would introduce some never seen before memes, and I would absolutely love it. The armor would be around 20 to 30mm and the vehicle's top speed would be around 45 km/h to 50 km/h. According to Davidblader, it would best suit around tier 5, but there are also some modified versions of the vehicle and variants of the Mareșal that could fit into tier 6 and 7 as well. Personally, I would love to see this freaking meme of a tank in the game. So huge thanks to Davidblader for providing me with information about these Romanian vehicles. I will also link his Romanian tech tree proposal in the description below. But now, finally, the number 1 tank on this list. If you have been following this channel for a decent amount of time, you will not be surprised to see that the number 1 vehicle is the Bob Simple tank. No, actually, number 1. Fiat 2000. We have made 3 videos in the past talking about this vehicle. That's pretty much 3 times the dedicated videos than for most vehicles on our channel, lol. And for a good reason. This vehicle represents the World War I era. It was the second ever tank in the entire world to mount a turret above the hull. And it's sexy as f***. fuck. Even with dimensions such as these, the gun depression is a whopping 10 degrees and the elevation is like 75 degrees. And the gun itself is a 65mm howitzer on a behemoth. If you don't understand how freaking amazing this tank is, let me tell you how amazing it is. It is so amazing that a bunch of Italians decided to recreate a 1-to-1 replica of this vehicle just for fun, because they freaking love this vehicle, probably even more than I do. None of the two original productions survived the war, so this replica is the only physical copy of the Fiat 2000 that currently exists in the world. We might have a bunch of Italian heavy tank concepts in the game, but this is the one and only true Italian heavy tank. Wargaming, it's now or never. If you don't implement this tank as, I don't know, a premium, a freaking Christmas tank or whatever, just anything really, I will touch your spaghetti, man. Okay, glad we settled that. In all seriousness though, this tank would make a really fun and enjoyable tier 2 or 3 super heavy tank. Kind of a TOG of sorts, with extremely limited mobility, but with a ridiculous amount of hit points to keep it alive. The 65mm howitzer would not be a powerful one, but since it would be mounted on such a large and tall vehicle, it would be able to shoot down and splash engine decks and modules for a moderate amount of damage, and deal a heavy amount of damage to lowly armored vehicles. The drawbacks would obviously be the size and mobility. I think it would be one of the most unique lower tier tanks in the game. So Wargaming, just do it. Thank you very much for watching this far into the video. And super thanks again to Davidblader and Mitsu for providing me some information about the Swiss tanks and the Romanian tanks respectively. I will link their tech tree proposals in the description below if you are interested in reading about their ideas. And I will also link to the Fiat 2000 replica project if you're interested in that as well. So what did you think about my top 10 tanks that should be in World of Tanks? Do you agree with me, or do you think I'm completely crazy? If you have some good suggestions of your own about vehicles that you think deserves a spot in the game, please let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.